Please introduce A.J. Anchel. A.J. is the District Aide to State Senator Adam Hinds and President of the Berkshire Black Economic Council. A.J.
Good evening, everyone. Great to see you all after such a long time. I want to first say thank you to Jeffrey, Brent, and the rest of the Lever team, staff, board for having me here. I'll be moderating tomorrow's panel, which will be on workforce innovation. And as you all know, I'm the aide for Senator Adam Hinds, but I'm actually here in a different capacity. I'm here as the Berkshire Black Economic Council's president, and I want to let you know a bit of what we've been up to. Our mission is to aid and advocate economic development on the behalf of the Berkshire Black business community. Right now, we've built up a directory, which is actually really exciting. It's been a lot of hard work, but we've gotten to a great place. Right now, I think a lot of you all will be surprised to know that we have 65 plus black businesses in Berkshire County. So round of applause to the board and the team for having dug up all this work. It's really exciting, and I'm proud to tell that to you all. We just had our first event this past weekend, which was a speed networking expo. It was really exciting. We tried to wrangle as many of the Berkshire Black businesses as we could to get them under one roof and introduce them and celebrate them with the wider Berkshire business community. So that was a really exciting kickoff event that we had, and I want to let you all know that after this, our next event will be a webinar session to educate Black and brown businesses on how to become certified as a minority-owned business. So that's in the works. I should also let you know 2 other projects that we're working on. Our survey, we're doing survey 1 and 2. One is the Black Business Needs Assessment to better understand what Black businesses need so they can be on the right footing to thrive. And then the other is a survey about arts integration here in the Berkshires. We want to understand how we can increase and improve diversity and participation in the arts and culture sector. So we're asking questions like what would make you feel safer, what would make you feel more visible in these spaces. So that's survey 1 and 2. The last thing I want to let you all know is that we're hiring coming up for FY22, and we'll be hiring a fellow which will have the primary responsibility of grant writing on the behalf of the organization, and it will be a $50,000 salary that we got funded through the state. So I wanted to just impart that on you all and let you know what we've been up to since we've founded in May, and I think we're going to have an awesome summit. So thank you again, Lever, for having me.
Thank you very much, A.J., for all that information. I'd now like to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Jamie Burge, President of the Mass College of Liberal Arts and Chair of the Lever Board of Directors. Jamie?
Well, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Lever Board, let me thank you for joining us here today. What a great day it's been, and it's just the first of 2 days, so the board and I are very pleased that all of you have joined us. As we end the day celebrating this spark of innovation that we've all witnessed throughout the day, I'd like to take just a few minutes to thank people for the work that they've done here. First, our good friends at Mountain One. Bob, thank you and your colleagues for being the lead sponsor for the Innovation Summit. Mountain One does so many great things for our community and for Lever, and we're really grateful that you could be here and your team could be here and to support this important work, so thank you. I also want to thank the Feigenbaum Foundation for their support of the Entrepreneurship Challenge. They've been good partners for Lever as well, and so we're grateful for their continued friendship as we continue this really important work in Berkshire County. The Lever team has worked tirelessly. You can imagine what it's like to try and put together an innovation summit when you're not entirely sure if you can be here in person or if it will be remote. But I think they've been rock stars today, frankly. And so I want to thank them, and I think we owe them another round of applause. So thank you all. The board is really pleased and grateful to be able to host this event here at the BIC, the Berkshire Innovation Center. We came in here, stormed in here, I think, and took over the place, and Ben and his team have been gracious and patient with us. And so, Ben, thank you for all the things that you've done to help us out here today. We appreciate it. Now I want to share with you a little bit of Lever news that some of you may or may not know. Along with the Massachusetts Technology Collaborative, Lever has just kicked off the COVID Recovery Challenge to accelerate companies that support caregivers, especially unpaid caregivers. This follows a series of COVID response challenges Lever has conducted over the past year, quite successfully, I will add. Lever has also just launched the second Berkshire Sustainability Challenge with 6 exciting companies, including BIC member SolarBlock, and so we're excited about that upcoming challenge. Additionally, Lever just announced its second Mohawk Trail Entrepreneurship Challenge. This program will focus on sustainable wood products in the region. If you were unable to see the first challenge in this category, I strongly encourage you to participate. It was fascinating, so exciting and wonderful, and so I'm glad that we have a second opportunity to share that good work that's happening in the region. Lever's Entrepreneur Challenges help companies grow revenues and create jobs using the same techniques that startups employ. Congratulations to Kripalu, the winner of this today's and this year's Berkshire Entrepreneurship Challenge. What a great series of conversations we had with 4 really incredibly exciting organizations. Congratulations to everyone, but especially to Kripalu. I'm also happy to share with you that early in 2021, Lever will conduct its first Vermont program, the Bennington Entrepreneur Challenge, focused on mature companies in the Bennington County area. Investment capital is an essential ingredient for starting and growing companies, of course. Lever launched its second venture fund last year and is actively investing in Berkshire region communities. 2 of Lever's portfolio companies, United Aircraft Technologies and Zeptiv, were here today and will be tomorrow, and so we're grateful for their participation today. Human capital is the most important ingredient in Lever's work. Lever's Berkshire Interns program places dozens of college-age students in internships every year. The Berkshire Entry program is now placing college graduates in entry-level jobs here in Berkshire County. At tomorrow's Workforce Innovation panel, we'll hear from Jade Schnauber, manager of Lever's workforce programs, about their work to bring more diversity into the Berkshire workforce. Some really very exciting work that's happening here, and I'm grateful to Jade for all of her good work in that area. Lever can only do all of this because of its talented staff. Unfortunately, the Lever team will be saying goodbye to Brent Filson after tomorrow, who will join the Ultimate Kronos Group to help it look at new technologies. I offer my congratulations and those of the board and thank Brent for his terrific work here at Lever over the last few years. Thank you, Brent. But we also have a great opportunity that's going to arrive at Lever. Joining the Lever team will be Zach Fury. Many of you know Zach from his work at MCLA, the Berkshire Regional Planning Committee, and the City of North Adams. And I will add that I've known Zach, certainly when I arrived at MCLA just 6 years ago. He preceded me in working at MCLA, and I can say I'm really delighted to be close to him again, to be able to do some work together. So we're excited to be bringing him in. He'll be joining us in mid-October. So that's the news from Lever. Thanks again for all the great things that you've done to support us, to support this program today, and I hope you'll be back tomorrow. And now I'll turn it back to my friend Bob Frazier for the rest of the program.
Jamie, thank you very much for those updates. It's now my privilege to welcome John Lewis, who is the CEO of Reset Enterprises of Pittsfield. John?
I'm glad to get rid of that mask while I'm here, so good. Thank you, everybody, and it is so great to see everyone here today. Where do I want to start? First of all, I'm CEO of Reset Enterprises, and anybody who wants to know who Reset Enterprises is, we are a company that designs ecosystems for cooperative community empowerment. We are a B Corp and social enterprise that creates tools and strategies and investments for community transformation, economic growth, and development. And we are so happy to be here at the Lever Innovation Summit, and we want to thank all the board sponsors and organizers, including Jeffrey, and as we became kind of sponsors and collaborators in terms of programming for this event. I will say we had a great first conversation with Jeffrey and Brent, and one of the things we had asked and talked about was how do we build a more innovative culture? Meaning that what are the set of values and beliefs that we need to incorporate as a community to begin to move that forward? So as we begin to talk about Reset and what we are, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we believe and who we are and how we approach community transformation. First of all, at Team Reset, we believe that our greatest resource of creativity comes from the very communities we live in. We also believe that communities that specialize in tapping into and nurturing those creatives is key to positive community transformation. We further believe creative thinking inspires ideas and it inspires changes. The late great poet Maya Angelou said, "Creativity is the most abundant resource that we possess. You can't use it up. Creativity, the more you use, the more you have." And we at Reset has taken that on as a mantra, and that informs us as our value as we create products and services and tools and strategies and embrace innovation as we begin to work in the Berkshire County for what we call community-based transformation. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about what that looks like and how that has played out over time and what the impact of that has been. We have first started with our Idea Jam, and I know a lot of you have heard of that, which is an innovative tool. Which is a design thinking workshop and reporting basis that we have done as an innovative structure to really create and pull from the creativity and innovative ideas and solution-based oriented design from our communities. And I am proud to say
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
There it is. So we have impacted over 300 individuals within our Idea Jam process. Berkshire United Way, Downtown Pittsfield Inc., also the healthcare industry, and lastly, the BEC Steering Committee and Black community stakeholders, where we had over 124 Black community stakeholders involved in the Idea Jam. And that has resulted in over $300,000 of community-based impact because of the research and reports. And that also marshaled in 2 major reports around the healthcare industry and also around Black economics and what the community wanted so far. And that's what we're talking about as we begin to move into how to take ideas into action. The next thing our innovation is the power of storytelling. And we believe that connection and narrative development is directly impacting of what we call economic growth. So we launched the first studio podcast, video studio, and podcasting storytelling studio within Berkshire County. And as you know, that innovation was embraced by One Berkshire. And One Berkshire then launched what we call That Berkshire Podcast. And I see Jonathan Butler, who is one of the sponsors, and I know one of the people I'm welcoming here is Margaret Kelly, who actually participated in that workshop, because a part of my job is to welcome everyone and thank them for being a part of the innovation that we are here doing. Also, Mayor Linda Tyre, Andrea Harrington, Milltown Capital, and Barrington Stage are just some of the clients, to name a few, that we have engaged in how we look at narrative storytelling and the power of narrative storytelling to effectively, dramatically impact economic growth, and sharing those stories regionally to get more people interested in coming to Berkshire County. One of the other ones I'm welcoming and saying thank you to is Deborah Gallant, Deanna Roofer, Casey O'Donnell, and Lori Mick. We have a philosophy that we believe that is each one teach one, but how does that actually relate in innovation? And I am proud to say that we launched along with E4All, and Deborah Gallant, thank you so much, so hands raised over here, that we launched the first ever online educational platform called Reset Academy, and we, in collaboration with E4All, we launched the first ever DigBiz course during the COVID-19. So sometimes crisis brings on innovation. As they say, necessity is the mother of invention. And during that time, a lot of businesses needed to marshal themselves online but didn't have a way to do that. And I am proud to say that we have done 2 basic classes and programs, and 50 businesses have successfully completed the actual program and have stayed in business and actually have gotten their business online. And I just want to say congratulations to Greylock Bank and also Mass Growth Capital, because they're going to do a second round, and we're going to do 2 more programs of this next year, and we're very excited about that. Lastly, I really want to talk about, and one of the other things we're doing, and I see that Wendy Healy is here, is an inclusive economic think tank. This is a think tank where we've come together and say, we envision where all people can share in an inclusive economic system that supports the needs and passions of communities. We are doing this by creating an inclusive economic systems and technologies that empowers thriving and resilient communities. And you'll be hearing more about that in terms of our podcasting platform, educational resources, and digital technologies that we will be pushing forward to help create more inclusive economies within the area. And we know that during George Floyd, that some people, during the COVID-19, we realized that most persons of color were not participating in the economic, what we call prosperity of America. So what do we need to do? We need to double down on our research. We need to double down on thinking through these issues and incorporating communities and educating ourselves and embracing innovative technologies that will solve these problems moving forward. And lastly, and I think that we want to talk about, is the Blackshirts Platform. I don't know about you, but during COVID-19, and I was serving as the Black Economic Council Chairman Steering Committee at the time, everybody wanted to get in touch with Black businesses, and we were trying to get resources out to those businesses. And I don't know how many email chains you went through in terms of trying to send it. It was probably the most inefficient way to actually try to communicate what available resources there were to communities. And I'm saying to you that we came up with a solution. It was called the Blackshirts. And the Blackshirts is the first pilot phase of an interactive directory and media initiative and community development network highlighting Black culture, organizations, businesses, people, and resources in the Berkshire County. Its objective and goal is to bridge the communication and relationship gap between Black community stakeholders of the larger community stakeholders in Berkshire County. And I am glad to report to you that we are running the first pilot, and that is launching on Monday. I would first like to thank Guido's as one of the sponsors. Businesses moving forward, thank you, Alana. It has been great and a pleasure to work with you. And I want to thank all the sponsors who have been really instrumental in helping us pull this together. Berkshire Bank, Gary Levante, and Angela Dixon, One Berkshire, the Crane Foundation, Greylock Federal, and also Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation. And there's Joe, thank you for coming. He's been a great ally to us as a fiscal sponsor, just guiding us through like this innovative platform. And we had a lot of conversations about that, and I really actually, it takes a community to really make these things work. The other thing that I want to do is say, and lastly, just to talk a little bit about one of the things that I want to say is the power of inclusion, diversity, and equity is absolutely important to our communities. And I want us to really take that seriously. My uncle says, and I talked to him this week, he says, you can't open new doors with old keys. We have to begin to innovate in this situation. And I'm going to share a personal story with you. This week, and I'm relating it back to, we have gone too far and too long without including people of color in the economic process, and that has had a dramatic effect in our communities. I literally just got news this Sunday that my cousin had passed away from COVID, and 30 minutes later, my brother, who was a veteran and who was a drug user and was kind of shut out of the economic market, was shot and killed. And it was one of the worst days I had in my life. And I said, well, how can I make this work? How can I take this forward? When we don't allow and we're not creating the kinds of participation and inclusion and equity within communities that absolutely desperately need it, this is the result. So we have to do better. We have to be better. And I think Lever and the group and Innovation Summit and all the partners that we have worked together with as we begin to move forward to address this issue in terms of embracing this important issue moving forward. I am incredibly excited to hear the next speaker, Kenn Turner. I just had an interview with him because we're also doing live podcast over there, and it is amazing to know that he has some real innovations and solutions moving forward. So I would like to say thank you again. Thank you all for coming, and I look forward to more innovation in the Berkshires as we begin to help it grow and make it a great place to work, live, and play. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and our sympathies to your family, and thank you for providing us with information about Reset and your mission overall. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening, Kenn Turner. Kenn Turner is the president and CEO of the Massachusetts Life Science Center, an economic development and investment agency dedicated to supporting the growth and development of life sciences in Massachusetts. He directs and oversees the center's operations, investment strategy, programs, and partnerships. Mr. Turner previously held leadership positions with Massport, Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Veteran Services, AOL Time Warner, Hallmark Cards, and Hasbro Toys. A retired U.S. Navy captain and submarine nuclear weapons system officer with 26 years of service to our country. Mr. Turner holds a BS degree in liberal arts from the Southern University and A&M College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Welcome. Thank you.
So I'm not used to being on the road and not staff, so I'm not sure if I'm supposed to work the system or somebody's supposed to do it for me.
Yeah,
I have to admit I'm used to my staff doing it for me. So.
that's fair. All right, and you can just hit the buttons when you wanna.
So how do we forward it?
Right here.
Okay, great. I can launch nuclear missiles, but I'm not sure I can do it. So. Good evening. Good evening. I'm a Southerner, so where I come from, when we do the call out, even in the Catholic Church, we would rev up and respond. So let me start by thanking Bob for that kind introduction and say just how incredibly pleased I am to be with you guys tonight here in Western Mass. I also want to take a moment to thank Jeffrey and the Lever team for this opportunity to be with you all. And given the last 18 months, I don't know about you, but it's really great to be someplace where I'm actually seeing real people, although I may only be seeing eyes, but it's better than little heads in squeeze boxes on a screen, which I don't know about you, drives me nuts about halfway through the day. Because I am a old country boy from Louisiana, and I prefer to meet people in person and deal with people in person, because I think that's how you really build relationships and get to know people. So convenings like this one are exactly what we need to be doing, and we need to do more of it. And I intend to do everything I can as the head of the Life Science Center to make sure that I'm spending more time out here and not just in the greater Boston, Cambridge area, and the Merrimack Valley, and in Worcester, and in Springfield, where I have been. So I applaud Lever and all of the partners involved for your leadership in organizing this gathering. This is a special opportunity for me, as it's my first time out here as in Berkshires as the president and the CEO of the Life Science Center. Now, before I jump into the presentation, I want to put something on the record, and I just said that it's my first time out here, but I want to make sure that you understand that this most certainly will not be my last. Look, there is nothing more important to me than regionalization. I was talking with John earlier in the podcast about strategy and about where I want to take the center and what I think is important in this role and what I think is important for the sustaining our innovation in the ecosystem here in the Commonwealth. And I think a big part of it is all about regionalization and how do we take what we're doing so well in the Boston-Cambridge area, supercharge that and spread it across the state. And so we can't do that by sitting in an office in Waltham or on Beacon Hill in Kendall Square. We need to get out here where real people are and figure out how we can spread the message of life sciences beyond the greater Boston-Cambridge area. And so I can tell you right now, I'm committed to doing that, and the center is committed to doing that, and I know that the Baker-Polito administration is committed to doing that. Let me see, what am I supposed to be saying? So, this is how it works. But normally right about now, they'd be like telling me to like, oh yeah, it's like slide 3 or whatever. So bear with me as I kind of blunder through this on my own. So it looks like, let me see here. So they want me to start off by talking about my perspective over the first 100 days as the new CEO. And basically, to put it, succinctly, what I tried to focus on was obviously getting onboarded. For those of you who don't know me, and in the kind introduction, I think you heard, nuclear weapons and submarines and the Navy and general management and the private sector across Hallmark or Hasbro or internet startups for AOL Time Warner, and then on to be deputy secretary and then the Port Authority. But you didn't hear life sciences. And that's not an oversight. It's because I'm not a scientist. I am not from a life science background. I'm not a researcher. I'm not an R&D guy. I didn't spend my private sector experience in the ecosystem, so this is all new to me. But nonetheless, the board and I agreed that this was a good fit because they thought that I could bring to bear my executive experience across the private sector, the public sector, and the military in a way that might drive the center in a different direction than what it's been. And so I say that to say this. I've tried to spend as much as I can in terms of my time over the last 90 to 100 days getting out, meeting as many stakeholders as I can in the industry, in academia, in non-for-profits, and in government with the intent of listening. I remember I was at a Gold Star luncheon. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Gold Star, those are families that have lost a loved one in combat, right? While on active duty. Back when I was deputy secretary, the secretary and I, on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon, I forget now, were up at Hanscom Air Force Base, and we were meeting with these families over lunch, and the treasurer at the time, Steve Grossman, joined us. And I remember what Steve said, because I thought it was so perfect. He started off talking about what it was like growing up in his home, and his dad said something to the effect that he said, Steve, you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth. My suggestion is that you use them in proportion. I like that. I absolutely appropriated that. I said, use them in proportion. So for the last 100 days, I've been trying to use mine in proportion. I've gotten out as much as I can. I've met as many folks as I can, but I've done it with an eye towards listening and listening with intent. What I wanted to do was try to figure out in the course of meeting people and hearing about their experiences and what their challenges are and what their successes are misses, right? Is there a pattern? And of course, I've seen some patterns develop in those conversations, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I focused on building out my team, which I'm still, frankly, in the process of doing. We're a pretty small group, but nonetheless, I want to try to make sure I have the right people in the right jobs, in the right places, and that's what any good leader does. And then it's about creating alliances and then ultimately setting a strategic framework. And what I've talked about in terms of creating alliances, it's nights like tonight. It's events like this where I get out and I meet people. I just met AJ tonight, right, with the Black Economic Council out here. That's an important relationship, right? It's my first time meeting the leadership of Lever in person. That's an important relationship. And so each of those bubbles that you see represented here, whether we're talking about the academic sector, the medical, government, incubator and early space, or industry leadership, there is literally a list of folks, some in excess of well over 100, that my team is scheduling meetings with me to get out and meet people, and I'm still in the process of doing that. And so primarily I go out, say who I am, shake their hands, we sit down, we grab a cup of tea. We talk a little bit about, inevitably we talk about submarines. Everybody wants to know about submarines and nuclear weapons, so I've gotten used to that. So we'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll talk about what's going on in their company or their organization or the role that they play in our vibrant ecosystem. And then we'll talk a little bit about where I see us going without, frankly, getting ahead of my skis, because, and I think it's embedded in the presentation later, where we'll talk a little bit about the work that KPMG and the Boston Consulting Group has done for us over the last couple of months to help me frame and chart where I should take the organization next. And I'll talk a little bit about that, hopefully without giving away all of the secret sauce, because I haven't shared it with my board, which I'm doing next week, or with the secretaries of ANF and HED. So let's see, what am I supposed to be talking about next? History. So I think many of you in this room are probably pretty familiar with the center, but nonetheless, I never make the assumption that folks know what I'm talking about. I was always amazed when I was over at the Port Authority that people didn't know like what an authority was versus an agency. And it's really straightforward, which is, and you know this, AJ, because you're in government, but agencies report up to secretaries. They make up the cabinet that reports to the governor. Authorities are independent quasi-government entities that are formed in effect by charter and by statute by the legislature. And we don't report to the governor, we don't report to a secretary, we don't report to the lieutenant governor. We work for a board, just like a company. Now, the trick is the board is appointed by, drum roll, the governor. So in 2008, the Patrick administration, in concert with partners on Beacon Hill, came up with this idea of driving life sciences. I'll tell you a little story. I had a chance to sit down with Governor Patrick just a couple of weeks ago, back out on a listening tour, and I asked him, I said, where did you come up with this? Like, what made you think that Massachusetts could lead in the life sciences? Because quite frankly, at the time we didn't. I mean, it's easy to forget 14, 15 years in, when we are preeminent in the life sciences, to always, to make the assumption that this was preeminent. This was preordained. In reality, it wasn't. At the time, we weren't leading in the life sciences, so what the hell made him think that we could? And he said something to me that was really interesting. He said, for a time, I worked in the oil business. He says, I know you're from Louisiana, so you get oil. I said, absolutely, sir, absolutely. And he says, when I say Texas, what do you think of? I said, oil. He says, when I say Iowa, what do you think of? I said, corn. And he goes, that's my point. When I thought about Massachusetts, you know what I thought about? Our people. Our people. Our capital. Our secret sauce. The thing that separates us from every state in the union is literally we have the most educated workforce in the United States. We have more advanced degrees and PhDs than any other state in the union. And so he said to himself, you think about academia, right, as a main economic driver for the state. Then you think about healthcare as a main driver. But then after that, it was literally our people. And so what do you need to drive life sciences? You need educated workforce. And so that's where the idea was born. And I thought that was really ingenious in its simplicity, but also in its vision. And so he was able to go to the legislature, lay out that vision, and do something that most states don't do. They actually agreed. And better yet, I'll take it a step further. They actually decided to fund it. $1 billion over a decade. Now, I don't know about you. I've been in government for 13 or 14 years now. I've been a CFO. I've ran companies, et cetera. $1 billion is a lot of money. That is a real commitment. That is a real commitment. And so with that $1 billion, we went into 2018, where the Patrick administration's funding ran out, and it was time for what's called a reauthorization. And so under the Baker-Polito administration, went back to the Hill, and again, lo and behold, they agreed for another 5-year stint of funding of about $625 million. So in effect, in the last 15 years, the legislature has committed to this ecosystem $1.5 billion to say that we want to be the leaders when it comes to life sciences in the United States. So let me talk a little bit about where that's taken us. Well, the mission. So our mission, obviously, is be the leaders in life sciences, okay? So forget reading the rest of that. I just told you. So how does this funding break down? As you can see here, $850 million of investments have been committed in the ecosystem. It's generated $4.7 billion in leveraged asset. Now, I don't know about you. I'm just an old country boy, but what that basically tells me is for every dollar that a taxpayer gave us to invest in our ecosystem, we were able to turn it out 4 times over. I think that's a pretty damn good investment, don't you? We've generated more than 15,000 jobs throughout the Commonwealth. We've invested $21.5 million in STEM equipment and professional development funding across almost 250 schools and middle schools throughout the Commonwealth. We deployed $35 million to provide for, as you can see here, almost 5,300 internships and apprenticeships at almost 900 companies since our inception. That program, by the way, is the one that I think is back to the secret sauce, right? Making sure that we've got the workforce that we need to maintain our preeminent position in the life sciences. And since 2018, 82% of the jobs committed through our tax incentive program, and this is what I love, is located outside of the greater Boston, Cambridge area, back to the regionalization that I was talking about. So this is what we've done with our investments. Let's see how it's paid off in terms of the ecosystem itself. We were talking about, what, $5 million awarded to 15 cross-sector capital projects focused on women's health, 1,300 jobs committed via our tax incentive programs. Oh, and by the way, feel free to ask questions as I go along, because I hate talking to people without any response. And so we don't have to stand on protocol. $6 million invested in data science innovation across 40 internships. That program just launched last fiscal year. We're going to go back and tweak it, frankly. I'm working with the team right now to rethink how we do it. Because, frankly, here's an example of how you innovate. That program was supposed to be driving diversity in the data science space, and guess what we ended up with? No disrespect, but a bunch of white guys. Now, I don't know about you, but that ain't diversity. And if you tell me, well, some of them were from Cambridge and some of them from Boston and some of them from Lowell, I go, well, your idea of diversity and my idea of diversity are slightly different. So we're going to go back and look at brown and black folks and women and see how we can try to fix that problem before we lay out another tranche of funding in this fiscal year. We've committed about $23 million in leverage investments by 29 industry and nonprofit partners. And then we've got, 38,000 students served in our STEM program. So again, huge investments across the board. So the impact, which is a slide I thought I was coming to, by the way. Here it is. We've got 89,000 jobs, right, in our ecosystem. Now, granted, if you peel back that onion, you'll see that only about 10% of those jobs are in the manufacturing space, and the rest of them tend to be in the R&D and research space and the administrative space. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I think that that's something we really need to think about as we go forward as an ecosystem. You can see a dramatic growth rate, right? 67% over the last decade. It makes up 5% of our total employment base here in the Commonwealth, back to Governor Patrick's and Governor Baker's vision of what the workforce should be here in the Commonwealth. 41% of all of our biopharma venture funding went to Massachusetts-based companies in 2020. 32% of all U.S.-based biopharma IPOs were Massachusetts-based. We take just under 10% of the NIH funding go to our hospitals and research organizations here in Massachusetts. 18 of the top 20 biotechnical companies have a presence here in Massachusetts, and on and on and on. I mean, it shows that we are indeed the leaders. And I would argue not just the leaders here in the United States, but the leaders in the world when it comes to life sciences. What has it meant for the Berkshires? Your 6 entrepreneur challenges, in partnership with Lever, $12 million to the Berkshire Innovation Center. In fact, I'm proud to say that my predecessor actually funded this center, and without that investment from the Life Sciences Center, we wouldn't be standing here tonight, right? $1.5 million in tax incentives to create 126 jobs at sterile manufacturing. In fact, tomorrow, I think before I head back to Boston, I've got a tour out to sterile manufacturing. I'm looking forward to that. We've spent $340,000 in STEM capital funding. And as you can see here, $669 million to the Berkshire Community College. So again, not a small investment by any stretch of the imagination in Western Massachusetts. Okay. I guess this is a building slide. Yeah, there we go. Let's just put them all up there. Yeah, there we go. I was looking at this slide just last night before I left the office. And as I said to the person who was kind of walking me through it, I said, as a diversity guy over at Massport, if you showed me those numbers, I would look at that and say, that's not bad, right? I mean, if you look at black and brown participation and women-led businesses, specifically as it applies to the stats here in Berkshire County, particularly at 12%, since that's your population, right? I go, that's pretty good numbers. But of course, it's not the full story, right? The full story is it's on a very small base, right? And so we have to be careful when we show numbers like this because they can be misleading. And it's not any intent or anything corrupt by it. It's math, but you just got to know what you're looking at, And one of the things I learned very early in the nuclear business was, precision counts, right? They wanted me to talk a little bit about the Massport model, and John asked me about this as well in the podcast that we just did. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, when I came to Massport in the summer, I think it was, of 2013, again, as I did with this job, I didn't have a background in DE&I, or compliance for that matter. I was a marketing guy and a general manager and obviously an executive leader, but I was not a practitioner in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was sitting at I'll never forget this, I was sitting at a breakfast with my CEO on Martin Luther King's birthday at the convention center, and this keynote speaker got up. He was a former ambassador to a country in Africa, and he was giving a speech, and he mentions as part of his speech that if you looked out across the city of Boston and you looked at the billions and billions and billions of dollars of economic input that was being flowing into the city in terms of commercial real estate and construction. And in fact, at the time, it was about $7 billion to give you a sense of scope, with another $6 or $7 billion already approved by the BPDA, and that was in the pipeline for driving construction in the city, that not one of those projects in the last 30 to 40 years had any black or brown equity or ownership in those teams. And I remember thinking, because sometimes I do tend to drift off in my head, wow, did he just say what I think he said? And I leaned over to my boss, Tom Glenn, the CEO, and Tom's one of those, white Irish guys who knows everybody and knows the history of everything. And I kind of leaned in and I went, is that true? And he looked at me and shook his head and said, yep, that's true. And I went home that night, I'll never forget it, and I just said, not only is that wrong, but that's repugnant. How can you possibly have that much economic activity happening, right, across the city, and you cut out every person of color in the country? Think about it. Not just in Boston, because who cares whether the money came from Roxbury, Dorchester, or Mattapan, right, or Cambridge? That money could come from Harlem. It could come from Chicago or Atlanta or D.C. or Maryland. There's really a number of places. We got black people and brown people with money. Why is it that, what?
Can you use your mic?
No.
Well, we need it for people
Oh,
online.
you need it for this thing.
Yeah, sorry.
I hate being tied to these things. Okay. All right, so we'll take it out. How is that? There we go. Sorry. So I'm so used to that Navy voice thinking I don't kind of need it, so it helps you hear, but obviously they've got people plugged in virtually back to me being a little square on a plague. But I just thought that was repugnant. And so I talked to Tom about it. I talked to my board about it. And then I talked to my team about it and said, I don't know what the answer is, but by God, we're going to figure it out. And that became the Massport model. Over the course of about 6 or 7 or 8 months, working in concert with my board, my executive leadership, the leadership of the Convention Center Authority, we were able to come up with a new scheme of how to think about how we do commercial real estate with government parcels. And it was simple, because everybody said, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that, because if you do, they'll sue you, and you don't have a disparity study that shows that people are underrepresented, they're being shut out. And I said, well, let me see if I got this right. So the Boston Fed did a report that showed that the average white family in the city of Boston has an economic accumulation of wealth somewhere north of $235,000. Anybody know what the average black family has? 8. And in fact, when I read that report, I kid you not, it was about 7, 8 o'clock at night. I was still in my office when I read it, and I picked up the phone and called the Boston Fed, because I know the diversity chief over there, and I knew he'd be working late like me. And I called him and I said, is there a typo? Because I literally thought there was a typo. And he goes, no. That's the difference. And it's simple, right? We know where that wealth comes from. It's generational wealth that comes from owning a home versus renting a home, right? It's generational wealth. So back to why it's so important that we have black and brown folks participating in commercial real estate ownership. And so we came up with a model that said we're going to only look at 4 criteria, and we're going to equally weight them at 25 points apiece. We would grade you on viability of your development team. We would grade you on your access to capital, because obviously those projects carry a good amount of debt, commercial debt. We would look at, obviously, what programming you had planned on that parcel, right? If it's a hotel, well, obviously we're going to look for design excellence, et cetera, et cetera. And then the final piece would be diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it had to have an ownership component. In other words, it isn't going to be just about goods and services. It isn't going to be just about construction or services of the building or operational services. It's going to be about ownership. And trust me, I had folks tell me, you're going to chill the market. Nobody's going to bid on Massport property. Oh, you're going to get sued, which that was my favorite. You're going to be sued. And my response was, well, the last time I checked, we have a 3rd floor in this building that ain't nothing but lawyers. So they bring their lawyers, I can bring my lawyers. Meet you at the courthouse. We put that RFP out. We had an incredibly robust response. If my memory serves me right, I think we had about 6 to 8. And by the way, this was an $800 million project. We're not talking about building a coffee shop. We're talking about building the Omni Hotel, which just opened 2 weeks ago, and the governor was there to do the ribbon cutting, right? $800 million. And so for the first time in the history of Boston in 40 or 50 years, we now have black and brown ownership of a commercial building in the city. And we went on to replicate that with parcel A2, and now with H, and on and on. So here's why, we're talking about this, because you're like, okay, that's great. Why are you breaking your arm, patting yourself on the back of what you did at Massport? You're now the president of the Life Science Center. I didn't have a damn clue as to how we were going to do that. But if you put smart people in the room, and you put the problem in front of them, and you clear the obstacles out of the way, and you resource them, and you tell them that they have the authority and the right to wipe the slate clean and come up with new, innovative, out-of-the-box thinking, and you're going to support that, you can do dramatic things. And that's what we're going to do in life sciences. We're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to clear the decks just as soon as I get through articulating our strategy over the next week with my board and with my internal, sources within the administration. We're gonna take a step back and look at biomanufacturing specifically. That's really where I want to lean in, because I think that that's where communities like this community can compete. Yes, the R&D is embedded where it is, right? That is Boston, Cambridge, and I get it. As expensive as that area is, and I've lived there for 25 years myself, and I live in the city. And I'm here to tell you, I'm on my 4th house, and each time I'm always amazed that, A, I'm able to buy one, and I think it's outrageously expensive. So I get it. $700,000 on average for a house in the city. Have you tried driving around Boston? Pre-COVID? You know, that's serious. It would take me 45 minutes just to go from my house to the airport, which is where I worked. 45 minutes. In my old job, I would be in my office in Rhode Island in 45 minutes. I kid you not. And it used to drive me nuts every day, because that's what I would think to myself. I could be in Rhode Island right now, and I'm just driving across the city. And if you caught the T, and God knows I am not going to get in trouble about talking about the T, because I know they mean well, and they're an authority too, and they're my brothers. But predictable, stable, right? Mass transit, those are the things you need. But if you don't try to push the R&D out of Boston, but instead say, we do some really sophisticated research. Look at Moderna, right? Look at Bayer, or Merck, or Vertex, right? They do this incredible research here, but they don't necessarily produce those products here. Why? Because as a Southerner, I'm here to tell you, if I bought a $700,000 house in Louisiana, do you know what that thing would look like? I'd have a helipad, right? With guards and gates and a yacht on the bayou, right? Because land is cheap and the labor force is ready. And they don't have to worry about congestion, right? And they got good schools there too, right? And so we can't beat them on the small molecule stuff, but I'm thinking we can beat them on the large molecule stuff. The really tough biomanufacturing stuff that takes precision, that takes a very educated workforce. Remember what I said, our secret sauce, our power is you. It's our educated workforce. And so we've got to convince our partners in industry to think like that. And I admit that that's not going to be an easy lift, but I'm convinced that we can. And that's what we're going to be working on, is we're going to take what we did in diversity at Massport and apply it to the life sciences with a slightly different twist. And that's the twist. And I want to look to move that out of Boston and out of Cambridge into our gateway cities, into the Merrimack Valley, into Lowell, into Lawrence, into New Bedford, right? Into Springfield, Worcester, here in Pittsfield, and in Lee. That's what I want to do. But I need your help. You guys know this. This is your community, not mine. You know it better than I do. I have to partner with you. I got to be willing to listen to you. And my commitment to you is simple, which is you'll find that I am no better partner than you can find on the planet. I'm loyal than a dog, trust me. Now, I'll bite the hell out of you like a dog too if you kick me, but I am as loyal as a dog. If you lean in and you're committed and you're passionate as I am about this, you'll find I'm in with you 150%. And we are at a beautiful inflection point. And that is so horrible for me to say coming out of COVID, because I think first and foremost about the deaths, right? Just the other day, we surpassed the total number of deaths from the great pandemic of influenza of, 1918, right? That's a horrible statistic. And all of us, at least I did, I thought we'd be out of this thing by now. I don't know about you, but I know when the vaccines came out, I was like, holy hallelujah, when can I get mine, right? Because the sooner we get them in our arms, then we get to herd immunity, and we lose the mask, and we can hug, and bars will open, and we can go back to the movies and all the stuff I like, and here we are. Here we are, right? Well, I can't affect that. But what it has done for us is put us in a position where, and I almost embarrassed to say it because it just seems so odd for a government guy to be saying this, we actually have more money than we know what to do with. I mean, how many times have we ever heard a government say that? We got over $10 billion from the feds for post-recovery. We projected that we were going to be in a huge deficit in terms of our state coffers. We came in $5 billion over the forecast. 5 billion with a B. So here's my point. As they scratch their heads trying to figure out how to spend that money, and it's not programmed, for the most part, the governor, as you know, put out, I think, $2.7 billion plan, housing plan, which they still haven't acted on in Beacon Hill yet. Not that I'm criticizing them, so let me be clear, because I'm going to need them. But the point is, it's unprogrammed. So we've got a terrific opportunity. If we come up with the right programming, we can come back to folks and say, here is how we execute biomanufacturing in the Commonwealth, and we upskill people, we reskill people, we bring women and minorities into the life sciences. My example is simple. My partner is Haitian. Her mom and dad actually live 10 minutes away from us in Dorchester, for those of you who are familiar with Boston. It's a black neighborhood. Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury are the black neighborhoods. I live in Hyde Park. It's a great neighborhood. And just 10 minutes away, you'd think we're in different worlds. But I look at those people. I look at her mom and dad. Work in a nursing home. One of them, he works for a restaurant. They do gig drives, right? For Uber and that type of thing. Well, they pay, but you aren't considered an employee. You don't get benefits. If you get sick and you take the day off, you don't get paid. If you get pregnant, right? There's no such thing as pregnancy leave. I'm saying, why don't we take those people, like her mom and dad, hard-working immigrant people who literally are scratching to get by, and by God, even with their combined incomes, it's below the federal poverty level, which to me is obscene. And we bring them into the life sciences. They don't have to be advanced degreed. They don't have to have a PhD. All you got to do is be trained. And so I'm going to work with industry, to define their needs. Because every company I visited told me the same, back to listening, has told me the same thing over and over and over again. We can't find the talent that we need in biomanufacturing. And so I'm going, okay, got it, data point. And then on the other side, we know that we've got a ready, willing, and able workforce that we can retrain and bring them into the life sciences. And we can push it out of Boston, back to my regionalization. That's my vision. That's the vision. And so I am eager to get started as early as week after next, to roll up our sleeves, to form the working groups. I just talked to Secretary Acosta, who heads up labor this morning, briefly, and she and I are going to reengage. HED, which is Keneally, and Secretary Keneally and I have already talked about this. So they know where my head is and where my heart is. I am going to double down and work on this 24/7, because I think that this is the key to our future. If we want to remain number one, I think we have to figure out the biomanufacturing nugget. We cannot supply the demand today. The projections are we're going to add another 40,000 jobs by 2024. We've got to get started. We've got to think of how our community colleges can crank out the workforce. We've got to think about the non-for-profits like Just a Start, or the Genomics Institute in Gloucester, or Mass Bioed apprentice program, which I just launched this morning and gave them a grant. We've got to look for these programs that I think can really work, but instead of cranking out 20 people here or 40 people a year, I need them to crank out 400 people, 700 people. We scale them up. I think that's how we do it. So I don't know what the rest of that thing says. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm stopped talking. I'm open for questions, and I'll take them from the floor.
Ken, thanks. I think we all benefited from you not having your staff here and putting a governor on you. But I really appreciate your vision and you sharing with us. And you referenced a couple of times, Boston, Cambridge, and and we see a lot of the expansion, in contiguous areas. And as you look at your vision to expand in the non-traditional real estate markets in cities and towns, what do you think are your biggest roadblocks to overcoming
It's a great question,
these
Robert.
issues?
No, thank you for that. I think, to put it bluntly, and again, I'm speaking bluntly, I think we've got to build better relationships with the towns so that they are, I hate this word, kind of like, bio-ready, but they need to be, right? I mean, I'm working, I won't get into the specific company. I have a company that's right outside of Boston, right? North, Lexington, right? And it's a great company. And they need to expand. But in the footprint they're in, they're losing their lease. And so we're trying to find them a new site. But they do large animal testing and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they do some really specific, very important work in the life sciences. So I really don't want to lose these guys. In fact, I think we can't lose these guys. But then you go to a town, and the town says, "Oh, well, we won't give you a permit for that." Really? Like, talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face. But I've got to find the right partners. I've got to spend time doing this, right? I've got to go search out the right towns so that, like North Carolina, we have site-ready spots to go when an opportunity presents itself. I think we do a great job of when a company comes knocking on the door from the outside saying, "Hey, I'm looking to relocate, and we're thinking about Massachusetts, and we're thinking about Pennsylvania, and we're thinking about North Carolina. What can you guys do for us?" We mobilize all of our forces together, and we go after that business. We do a great job of that. But we're going to flip that script. We're going to be proactive moving forward. That's part of my strategy, which I didn't talk about. But we're going to be proactive. I already have a list of industry partners already embedded in Massachusetts that I need to build a relationship with. And look, I'm an old country boy, right? Love country music. Kenny Rogers had this song saying, "You can't make old friends." In other words, you have to invest, right? I've got to get out and meet them, spend time with them. They get to know me. I get to know them. And over time, we can have a conversation about what do you want to be 5 years or 10 years down the pike, and then we can start to work with them so we keep them here and scale them up. So that's a part of it. But a big part of it is the towns. The big part of it is relationships with the leadership in the companies that we have here that we want to scale up. The other piece of it, though, I think, is the commercial real estate brokers. That's another group I've got to spend time with. Companies like Galaxy and JLL and Colliers, et cetera. I've got to have them on speed dial, and they got to have me on speed dial. And so all of that is the kind of work that I'm going to pour my heart into. And again, I'm eager to get started because all of this is, frankly, I'm kind of giving you my strategy. All of this is a strategy work that I'm unveiling next week internally. So that's what it's going to take. And again, this ain't going to happen overnight. Relationships don't happen overnight. I've got to go out and have that first conversation where we just have a cup of coffee and get to know each other, right? And then the next time we'll have a different conversation because I'll be talking about the strategy. And then the next time I come out, we'll have a conversation about them and where they're going. And then we can start to build on that. But I think that's the kind of hard work it's going to take. It ain't rocket science, and I am a rocket scientist. I just think it takes hard work, it takes intentionality, and it takes a strategy, and it takes leadership, and it takes focus. And that's what I'm going to bring to it. That's what I'm going to bring to it. And I would say, record me, put me on record, ask me where we are a year from now, right? Hold me to it. Hold me to it. You got a question, John?
Yeah, here we go. I love the vision and where you're going with this and how does diversity, equity, and inclusion in terms of building this team and training this team to help execute this vision? And what are your
I just talked about it. I said I think it's an opportunity to not only lead in to bring us up to a leadership position in biomanufacturing, but it's a chance to what I call reskill and upskill, right? Let's take these gig workers who are primarily immigrants and who are primarily people of color and bring them into the life sciences that way. Because then, look, I've got to focus on kind of two pipes. There's the traditional STEM pipe, right? Which is the advanced degrees, the PhDs, et cetera. And we know that we have to kind of grab kids, get them interested in science, get them interested in math, et cetera, et cetera. You saw the investments we're making there. I think we need to make more investments. And oh, by the way, I think we got to start earlier. I think that's the other problem, is that we're starting too late, right? We got to start earlier. We need to be looking at, we need to go from high school, we need to now go to middle schools and figure out how we do. Oh, and by the way, we're going to turn those programs into, we're not just going to schools, we're going to schools in underrepresented communities specifically, right? And let's look for women and people of color in those schools. No disrespect to Lexington or Burlington or any number of the communities around Boston or Wellesley, right? Do you think they need my money? I don't think they need my money. They're not getting my money. We're going to go to Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan. We're going to go to Lawrence, right? Right? That's where we're going to go.
Exactly.
We're going to go to Gloucester. Let's go to communities where people really need us and figure out how to help those kids get excited about science. So that's one pipeline, but that's back to the R&D. I'm talking about manufacturing. So I can't take my eye off that ball, right? Because we got to have that. But I'm talking about biomanufacturing. I'm tired of companies going to North Carolina, or Pennsylvania, or Maryland, or heaven forbid, Texas. That pisses me off. No, not going to happen. We're going to fight for those companies. Sure. Certainly.
So my name is Greg. I work for, we met
earlier.
actually, right?
Yeah.
So I work for a company that's actually we're an importer, but we manufacture machinery. We
Right.
sell to life sciences.
Centrifuges, as I recall.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely right. Yep. One of the images that you had up there was of Deval Patrick. In the announcement that he made, I was actually at the Bio show in 2008.
Yeah.
Shook his hand that
Yeah.
day. It was an incredible day for Massachusetts companies.
Yeah.
My business is certainly in life sciences. We supply machines to mRNA manufacturers,
Sure.
like you're talking about. Sold a machine multiple times to a company in Sterlington, Louisiana,
Okay.
not too far from where you would be from, maybe 4 hours north or so.
Yeah.
One of the other industries that we're in is in the textile industry, and you have colleagues at Massachusetts schools, particularly MIT, and they
Yeah.
do a specialty fiber, functional fibers.
Okay.
One of the things that they did, and this gets back to starting earlier, I travel around the
Right.
country, I travel around the globe. You can't get kids into manufacturing early enough. Pittsfield has a very nice new school, the Taconic High School.
Mm-hmm.
It's got an awesome technical school for building autos. Right? Some machine work. That's the kind of place that I think you can begin
it's a
to
voc-
gain.
so
It's not a Vogue school, but
it's
has
not a Vogue school?
vocational tracks, right? It's
Okay.
not like a separate school like it
Okay.
has been traditionally.
Okay.
So for me, just going back to your point about getting started earlier,
Right.
that's really where I think there's an opportunity is to fund. I see the community colleges. I've worked with University Mass at Lowell.
Yeah.
It's got to come in earlier.
Yeah.
And when you do that and you show the possibilities and the excitement, you'll find those young people that are really gravitating to
Right,
it. But the
right.
manufacturing is a vocation. The people that I hire, I look to see what they can do with their hands
Right.
and their eyes.
Right, right.
It's not just a computer screen.
Right.
You have to be able to apply it. So again, I'd encourage you to try to flow those dollars down, if you can, into earlier education to get people glued to the excitement that is the life sciences.
Greg, you're literally preaching to the choir, and I'm on the first pew. I am totally convinced that the program we have in place for high schools is great, and we're going to fund that program. I'm not going to defund it, but I think we have to start sooner. And so what I'm going to challenge the team to do is to figure out how can we do a better job in middle schools, right? Let's come up with some really innovative, thoughtful programs for how we can, A, support the schools, labs, equipment, et cetera. So that's the capital investment. But then we have to train the teachers, right? So that's kind of the professional development piece. And then we come up with the programming itself. And so just like we tackled the high schools, and I think we've been really good at that, I think we need to move it down to the middle schools. And that's my intent. So I appreciate that. Thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
I have
Oh, sorry. I have admittedly a naive question here because I'm somewhat new to Massachusetts and learning about the.
I've only been here 25 years, and they still think I'm a carpetbagger.
But one of the other, if I was a biomanufacturing company and I was looking to set up here, in addition to the labor costs, is electricity costs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm trying to understand why Massachusetts electricity costs are so high. And if I was a company, that would be another factor
That is
I
a
would
factor.
be seriously looking at
No,
in terms of
that
why
is
I
a
would
factor.
set up here and what can be
And
done about that.
I'm glad you brought it up. So first off, I'm not going to tackle like electricity, but I will say this. Back to working with the cities and the towns so that we have the site ready to go when we have these opportunities. That's a big part of it. Part of the strategy calls for me spending time with the town managers, but then it also has a carve out for utilities. So I've got to build a relationship with all the utility companies as well. I didn't say that earlier, but yes, that's actually part of the strategy, is I've got to make sure that they know me, I know them, they know what we need when we talk about a typical plant and what that footprint is, because there is a high demand for electricity when you're building a plant, and there's also a high demand for water, right, for the bioreactors. And so those are the types of things that we need to kind of think about in advance, and in effect have it pre-baked into the system, so that when the opportunities come along, you go, okay, wait, this is great for Danvers, or this is great for Lowell, or this would be great for New Bedford, or this is great for Pittsfield, right?
Are there conversations about that happening at the state level?
No, that's correction. Yes, but they're not happening with the level of intentionality that I intend to bring to it. The answer is yes. Yes.
So I'm also not a scientist. I failed biology in high school.
Well, I wasn't quite that bad.
And the Massachusetts term for carpetbagger is a wash-ashore, just so that you know.
I appreciate the correction, and thank you so much for reminding me that I'm not from here. And just as soon as the vaccination rate gets up above like 60 or 70% down in Louisiana, I can go home.
My big question is, everything that you've described for life sciences, I'm in AI, fintech, and cyber, is also true for every technological vertical in the state. We're hemorrhaging companies to Silicon Valley like Drift.
Yeah.
We're hemorrhaging developers to West Virginia because of the price and all the initiatives happening there.
Yeah.
Is there a lateral initiative to work with other areas of the government to do what you're doing with other departments in tandem?
Secretary Acosta, Rosalind Acosta, right, heads up labor. She and I were on a virtual platform this morning to launch the Mass Bioed apprenticeship program together, along with the Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh, former mayor of Boston, and Representative Trahan from Capitol Hill. So why am I bringing it up? Because when we were in the virtual green room, right in the back, she and I started talking. And I said, hey, I've been meaning to reach out to you to spend some time with you because I have this idea. And she goes, oh, it's funny because I was just talking to Secretary Keneally about the fact I wanted to talk to you about, she specifically wants to talk tech. I want to talk biomanufacturing. So to answer your question, we agreed this morning that, yep, we need to get together and kind of like figure out how we're going to work together to figure this out. Because there is a problem. I had someone literally say to me the other day, like, do you really want to talk about the problem publicly? And I was like, well, if we don't talk about it publicly, then how are we ever going to fix it? See, that's what I love about government, see? And you can tell I'm not from government. So I was like, well, if we don't talk about it publicly, then how do we fix it? So, of course I want to talk about it publicly, and I'm going to talk about it publicly. But, folks don't want to fail, right? They see trying something innovative and not getting it right is failure. Well, I don't know about you, but what the submarine force taught me is, A, if you want to win, you got to be bold, right? You can't be reckless, but you need to be bold. And it also taught me that 9 out of 10 times failure isn't fatal. Now, when I was 21, 22 years old, the decisions I made could kill people, could start a nuclear war. I go home every night thinking to myself, I didn't kill a single person. None of the decisions I made could kill a single person. So guess what? I can come back tomorrow and try something even more innovative. And if it works, we're going to do more of it. And if it doesn't, I'm going to scrap it and we're going to do something different. It ain't fatal. That's the difference between how I think and how they think. So yes, I get it. We need to be bold. We got to try new initiatives. We've got to be as hungry as these guys are. They're hungry. They're hungry. They go after them. They go after them, and I get it. I'm a marketer by training. I totally get it. And so we've got to be as hungry. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You talk about uptraining the workforce. Is that realistic? Do you have some concepts that would take? How long might that take? And
it really depends on part of the complexity is that when you say biomanufacturing technician, it's very different from what one company needs versus the next company. That's the first thing I figured out, that it's not universal. So that's one complexity that we've got to figure out. And I've already asked my industry partners to work with me on this to help us figure out the demand, right? We need to be very specific and explicit about what the demand is. And yes, to answer your question point blank, you're goddamn right, it can be done. But what it's going to mean is that we're going to have to lean in with the community colleges, like California. Do you know in California they've got some 200 some odd community colleges, and by God, they have this radical idea about why don't we all teach the same thing? There's a radical approach for you. We have 15 in Massachusetts, and they all teach something different. And only 2 of them that I visited actually have a robust program for biomanufacturing, and they are knocking it out the ballpark. Literally, I mean, I was like amazed at what they were doing. Middlesex Community College, unbelievable program. Mass Bay, unbelievable program. But that's 2 out of 15. North Carolina, they all teach the same curriculum when it comes to biomanufacturing. They have a curriculum. California, all the community colleges teach the same thing. We've got to think that way. So don't tell me, is it possible? Yeah, it's possible if you have the political will to do it and stop the bickering and the infighting and think about the future. And that's where leadership comes in. You heard the kittens. And the ones that don't want to play right, well, you know what to do with them too. Any final questions? See, you brought out the submariner in me. All right.